Imagine walking into your own garage one morning and realizing your car wasn't there. Not because it was stolen, but because your neighbour, backed by the HOA, had decided your space was theirs to use. That's exactly what happened to Mark Sullivan, a quiet family man who only wanted peace in his community. But when the HOA's president, Evelyn Sharp, kept pushing her petty power into his life, Mark finally snapped. What he did next set off a chain of events that shook the entire neighbourhood. And in the end, no one would look at Maplewood Estates the same way again. Mark Sullivan was the kind of man who minded his own business. A mid-40s engineer, husband to Anna, and father of two, Emily, age 11, and Jacob, age 9. They had moved into Maplewood Estates 5 years earlier, drawn by the manicured lawns, quiet cul-de-sacs, and promises of a safe, family-friendly environment. For a while, it was just that. Barbecues in the backyard, kids riding bikes down the street, and neighbours waving from their porches. Mark enjoyed tinkering in his garage, fixing up an old motorcycle with Jacob at his side, while Anna worked on her small garden. But behind the perfectly painted fences and picture-book atmosphere, the community was governed by the Homeowners Association, a board that many ignored until it became a problem. At the top sat Evelyn Sharp, a woman in her late 50s with a razor-sharp bob haircut and an even sharper attitude. To Evelyn, Maplewood Estates wasn't just a neighbourhood, it was her kingdom. From the very beginning, Evelyn's presence was felt. A letter here, a fine there. Residents learned quickly that any step out of line could mean trouble. Mailboxes had to be painted regulation black, lawns trimmed to precisely 2 inches. Even leaving a trash bin out past 7 a.m. could cost you. Mark brushed it off at first. He figured it was easier to follow the rules than fight them. But Evelyn had a way of sniffing out control wherever she could. The first real clash came when Anna planted sunflowers along the fence. They weren't invasive, they weren't harming anyone, but Evelyn sent a notice. Non-compliant flora, remove immediately. Mark thought it was absurd, but Anna reluctantly pulled them up. "We'll pick our battles," she said, shaking her head. Still, the tension simmered. It wasn't long before Evelyn found another reason to intrude. The Sullivan kids left chalk drawings on the driveway one summer afternoon. Flowers, hopscotch, a sun with a smiley face. By evening, Evelyn was at their door with a clipboard. "This violates community appearance standards," she lectured. "It must be cleaned immediately." Mark clenched his jaw but stayed polite. He didn't want to make enemies. But the truth was, Evelyn's constant interference was starting to feel personal. Neighbours whispered about her tactics too. Mrs. Thompson, an elderly widow who lived 2 houses down, admitted Evelyn had threatened to fine her over a small bird feeder. David Miller, a young father, confessed he'd paid hundreds in late fees after receiving letters he never even got in the first place. Everyone had a story. Everyone had a scar. Mark began to see the pattern. This wasn't about rules. This was about power. And Evelyn thrived on reminding people who held it. Still, nothing prepared him for the day he walked into his garage and saw someone else's car parked inside. It belonged to Evelyn's nephew, visiting from out of town. She had given him permission to use community property, except it wasn't community property. It was Mark's garage, his space, his sanctuary. That was the moment something inside him snapped. And from there, the war between Mark Sullivan and Evelyn Sharp began. At first, Mark tried to be reasonable. He confronted Evelyn in front of the garage, his voice calm but firm. "Move the car, this is trespassing," he said. Evelyn smirked, arms crossed. According to Section 14B of the Community Charter, the HOA has discretion over shared spaces. "Shared?" Mark shot back. "This is my property deed. You don't get to decide who parks here." Evelyn only smiled, like a queen, indulging a subject's tantrum. "We'll review it at the next board meeting." But she didn't move the car. Not for hours. not for days. That's when Mark made his move. He shut the garage door, locked it, and left town for a week on a work trip. Evelyn's nephew's car sat trapped inside for 10 long days. By the time Mark returned, Evelyn was livid. She slapped him with a formal violation notice claiming improper use of property and endangering a guest. The fines started piling up. $50, then $100, then $250. Mark refused to pay. That's when the harassment began in earnest. Letters arrived daily, stamped in red. Final notice. Evelyn and her board allies, Tom Reynolds and Linda Hayes, held emergency meetings just to discuss his non-compliance. One evening, Mark came home to find his mailbox padlocked shut. Another morning, Anna discovered a violation notice taped to their front door for leaving a garden hose coiled incorrectly. Neighbours began whispering, watching. Some sympathised, others kept their heads down, afraid they'd be next. Evelyn thrived on that fear. But Mark wasn't backing down. He started documenting everything. Every notice, every fine, every petty threat, scanned, copied and filed. He set up cameras to catch board members snooping around his yard. He even kept a log of dates and times Evelyn showed up unannounced. Meanwhile, Evelyn escalated. She filed a lien against Mark's property, claiming thousands in unpaid fines. She even threatened foreclosure, a tactic she'd allegedly used before against residents too afraid to fight back. The pressure at home mounted. Anna worried constantly. "What if we lose the house?" she whispered at night. Emily and Jacob were anxious, asking why their friends said their mum and dad were in trouble with the neighbourhood. Mark knew he had to act. That's when he hired Rachel Carter, a sharp attorney who specialised in HOA abuse cases. Rachel didn't flinch at Evelyn's tactics. She'd seen worse. "Document everything," she told Mark. "We're going to court." The courtroom was packed. Residents of Maplewood Estates filled the benches, some in quiet support of Mark, others out of morbid curiosity. Evelyn strutted in like royalty, flanked by Tom and Linda, her ever-loyal board members. Mark sat at the plaintiff's table, beside Rachel Carter. He felt the weight of Anna's hand on his shoulder, steadying him, reminding him why he was fighting. The opening arguments were sharp. Evelyn's lawyer painted Mark as a disruptive homeowner who refused to follow rules. Rachel countered with evidence, photographs, logs, letters, a thick binder full of Evelyn's harassment. But the turning point came when Rachel called witnesses. Mrs. Thompson, voice trembling, described how Evelyn had threatened to fine her for a bird feeder. David Miller held up falsified late notices, showing dates that didn't match postmarks. Piece by piece, the facade crumbled. Then came the bombshell. Rachel presented financial records obtained through discovery. Evelyn had been funneling HOA funds into maintenance projects that didn't exist. Thousands of dollars gone, redirected into accounts tied to Evelyn and her allies. The courtroom gasped. Even the judge's eyes narrowed. Evelyn sputtered, denying it. But the evidence was undeniable. Her power, once so untouchable, was slipping away before everyone's eyes. When Rachel delivered her closing statement, her voice rang with conviction. "This isn't just about one man's garage. This is about abuse of power, intimidation and corruption. If unchecked, it destroys communities. Today, you have the chance to stop it." The judge's ruling came swiftly. Evelyn Sharp was found guilty of harassment, fraudulent fines, and misuse of HOA funds. She was ordered to repay thousands, stripped of her position as president, and barred from serving on any HOA board again. The courtroom erupted. Some residents cheered, others sat in stunned silence. Evelyn stormed out, her once loyal allies trailing behind in shame. Mark felt the weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in years, he could breathe freely. But the story wasn't over yet. The real impact was only beginning. In the weeks that followed, Maplewood Estates changed. Evelyn's removal left a vacuum on the HOA board, and for the first time, residents realised they had a voice. Elections were held, and this time, people showed up, really showed up. Mrs. Thompson was elected treasurer. David Miller became secretary. For the first time, the HOA was led by people who actually cared about the community, not about power. The fraudulent fines were refunded, the lien on Mark's property was removed, and Evelyn's name became a cautionary tale whispered at barbecues and block parties. For Mark, the victory was more than personal. His kids could ride their bikes again without worrying about rules. Anna replanted her sunflowers, their golden heads swaying in the breeze, a quiet symbol of resilience. The garage, once a battleground, became a workshop again. Mark spent evenings tinkering with Jacob, laughter echoing through the open door, no clipboard-wielding figure looming nearby. But perhaps the greatest impact was on the neighbourhood itself. Where fear once ruled, solidarity took root. Neighbours began talking more, supporting each other, even laughing at the absurdity of the past. Local reporter Jessica Lee ran a feature titled "The HOA That Fell Apart: One Man's Stand Against Corruption." It spread beyond Maplewood, inspiring others trapped under similar regimes. Letters poured in, thanking Mark for showing it was possible to fight back. As for Evelyn, she faded into obscurity. Rumour had it she moved in with a relative out of state, her reputation in shambles. The once feared president was now just a footnote in the history of Maplewood Estates. One evening, standing in his yard as the sun set over the cul-de-sac, Mark reflected on it all. It hadn't been about a garage. It hadn't even been about fines or notices. It was about dignity, about standing up when no one else would. About showing his children and his neighbours that some battles are worth fighting, no matter the cost. He turned to Anna, who was watering her sunflowers, and smiled. "We're finally home," he said. And in that moment, Maplewood Estates felt like a neighbourhood again. So, what would you have done in Mark's place? Would you have fought back against Evelyn, or played it safe like so many others? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
This was just one story, but the next one will be even more dramatic. Are you ready? Then you need to subscribe to HOA Stories 87 right now. Like this video, share it with your friends, and hit the bell because the next story might sound a little too close to home.